10%. That's the new tariff the US just placed on Canadian goods. The headline sounded distant politics policy press conferences, but it didn't stay distant for long, because the price of trade doesn't stop at borders. It waits quietly at the checkout counter. It hides in your grocery bill, your dinner, your morning coffee. When a tariff rises, it ripples through rail lines, warehouses, and shelves that look the same, but suddenly cost more to fill. What feels like a government feud is really a tax on everyday habits, spread thin across meals brands and moments we thought were safe from geopolitics. So, how deep does it go deeper than you might think? From the beef on your grill to the syrup on your pancakes, some of the most ordinary foods in your kitchen are caught in the crossfire. Tonight, we'll uncover 7 Canadian foods that could quietly double in price if this standoff holds. Stay until the end because one of them might already be in your cart. 1. Beef. The same cut crosses once, the price crosses back. In the past few weeks, Americans have started noticing it, the quiet jump at the butcher's counter. Ribeye that sold for $12 a pound now sits closer to $14. Ground beef, once a weekday staple, creeps up by quarters every grocery trip. Chain restaurants are rewriting menus mid-quarter, cutting ounces to keep combo prices steady. It's not a shortage, not yet. It's a widening gap between what beef costs to move and what people can afford to eat. And at the center of that gap sits a new 10% tariff on Canadian goods. It was announced as a policy move, not a punishment, but tariffs rarely travel alone. They bring paperwork, inspection delays, and higher insurance costs. In beef, where the border has long been a handshake, those frictions sting fast. To be specific, the United States imports roughly $3 billion of Canadian beef every year, fresh, chilled, or frozen. The two countries built an integrated system over decades. Cattle graze in Alberta, finish in Nebraska, get processed in Manitoba, and ship seamlessly across that invisible 49th parallel line. It's not two industries. It's one circulatory system, and one pulse can't rise without the other feeling it. Calves are raised, fed, and finished in cycles planned months ahead. Feed costs, market weights, and transport schedules are balanced with near-surgical precision. When a tariff lands mid-season, it doesn't just change the math. It scrambles the rhythm. Trucks that once rolled through customs in minutes now crawl for hours. Every idle minute burns fuel, cools product unevenly, and turns what was once a logistical routine into an expensive guessing game. By contrast, packing plants that relied on cross-border scheduling are now juggling inventory daily. The chilled chain from slaughterhouse to supermarket relies on time, not slogans. A missed truck slot means overtime, recooling, or waste. A tariff doesn't only cost money, it costs hours, and in the meat world, hours can ruin margins faster than headlines. A tariff adds a toll to every pound, silent, automatic, indifferent to brand. There's no label saying tariff included. The cost hides in freight contracts and the whisper of distribution managers revising invoices overnight. For some companies, it's a few cents. For others, it's the difference between filling an order or skipping it entirely. As a result, boxed beef bids tighten. Retailers reprice weekly instead of quarterly. Restaurant buyers mix cheaper cuts into blends. Menus shrink by ounces. Family packs stretch by price. The steak looks the same, but its journey now costs more diesel, more waiting, more doubt. For now, the shock is quiet, pennies here, dollars there, yet its direction is steady. Canada's feed grains still flow south. American cattle still cross north. The partnership holds thinner but not broken. But every border toll paid in silence slowly redefines what local means in a global kitchen. One Midwest buyer summed it up softly. We can keep the case full, but the math's getting harder every week. In the end, the steak still sizzles, only the pathway changed. And if a simple tariff can cook this much uncertainty into dinner, wait until we talk about cookies. 2 bakery products. The cookie aisle still smells sweet, only the price tags turned bitter. A few months ago, a box of simple butter crackers cost barely $3. Today, the same box flirts with $4. Family packs that once stretched 2 weeks now feel shorter, not because we eat faster, but because the packages quietly shrank. Supermarket shelves haven't changed color, but their arithmetic has. At first glance, this looks like inflation's slow aftershock. But behind those snack aisles lies a trade artery most people never see. The United States imports nearly $5 billion worth of Canadian baked goods each year: biscuits, wafers, cookies, crackers, granola bars. Every brand you know has some link across that border. Factories in Ontario bake dough mixed with American sugar, plants in Pennsylvania wrap pastries made with Canadian flour. It's not about nationality, it's about efficiency. Yet efficiency is the first thing tariffs break. Many of those snacks begin with Canadian grains, oils, and starches that cross borders multiple times before becoming a finished good. Wheat might travel south for milling oil, might travel north for blending packaging, might come from either side, and by the time the cookie reaches your cart, its passport has more stamps than yours. Beneath that, the new tariff now taxes both ingredients and the final product. It's a double toll on the same comfort. Each crossing adds cents. Each cent multiplies by millions of units. When shipping managers recalculate pallet costs, they don't see politics, they see pressure. A truckload that once paid for diesel and wages now pays for paperwork inspection and a surcharge that no recipe can hide. Carton printers, label suppliers, and pallet contractors absorb their own increases too. Corrugated cardboard prices are up. Ink shipments from Quebec face duties. Film wrap costs more to import. These aren't visible on any nutrition label, but they shape the final number at checkout. The cost of sweetness is no longer just sugar, it's distance, compliance, and time. In practice, retailers who used to plan seasonal promotions must now adjust on the fly. Discount cycles shrink. Shelf resets happen mid-quarter instead of mid-year. A buy one, get one sale is less a marketing push and more a quiet attempt to clear inventory before the next round of recalculations. Promotions once predictable now feel improvised. Even so, most shoppers don't know the reason. They only feel the fatigue of choosing between boxes that used to cost the same. They look identical, a woman in Ohio says, holding up two nearly matching packs of cookies. But one's thinner. I guess that's how we pay now. Her tone isn't angry, just resigned the way people sound when something invisible but steady keeps tightening. Behind her, a clerk restocks the shelves. The packaging is still glossy, the slogan still cheerful. Yet the silence between aisles feels heavier. It's the sound of tariffs doing what tariffs always do, shifting cost from governments to households quietly, one snack at a time. On balance, the cookie aisle will stay bright and familiar, but something underneath has changed. Each bite now carries a trace of bureaucracy, a taste of distance, a reminder that comfort can be fragile. The shelves hold sweetness, the system beneath them holds strain. And somewhere down the line, the trucks carrying frozen potatoes are starting to feel it too. 3 frozen potatoes. Potatoes have always been the cheapest comfort on the plate. Lately, they're proving just how expensive cheap can get. Across grocery freezers, a family-sized bag of frozen fries that once cost $3 now hovers near $3.50 or quietly shrinks while keeping the same tag. At fast food chains, combo meals climb by dimes that no one mentions aloud. You still hear the fryer hiss, still see the salt fall, but behind that familiar routine, every serving costs a little more to keep warm. Next, the numbers tell a quiet story. Supermarket trackers show frozen fries up nearly 15% since spring. It isn't drought, and it isn't demand. The harvest was fine, the appetite unchanged. The trouble starts between fields and fryers where cold storage meets customs. Tariffs on prepared foods now touch par-fried potatoes, adding cost not by weight, but by weight. Most fries are par-fried just north of the border, flash frozen, then staged for southbound trucks that feed thousands of American restaurants. Those plants were designed around speed fries, cooked once, cooled once, and gone within a day. Now that rhythm wobbles, truck queues stretch, cold storage fills faster than it empties. The hum of compressors grows constant and electricity bills rise in step. In turn, every extra checkpoint adds minutes that no one budgets for. Diesel burns through idling tanks. Refrigerated trailers pull longer shifts. Temperature drifts by a degree or two enough to force refreezing or rejection. In an industry measured by consistency, time is the only variable nobody can fry out. Finished fries now pay duty per case while raw potatoes remain untaxed. A quiet irony, the farther you take a potato from the soil, the more expensive it becomes to cross the line. It means convenience itself is the costliest ingredient. For franchise owners, the math is merciless. A penny here too, there multiplied by millions of orders a week. Notably, supply contracts once locked for a year are being reopened mid-term. Distributors reprice pallets. Portion grams slip downward to protect combo prices. Some chains test new lighter servings, a polite phrase for serving less. The label still reads value meal, but the value is thinner than before. Still, customers don't rebel. They adapt. The habit of fries is too deep. A mother in Michigan shrugs while splitting one order between two kids. They taste the same. Just gone faster. She says it with a small laugh that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Inside the kitchen, the rhythm is slower. A night manager in Detroit wipes steam from his glasses and says, "The fries keep coming just slower, and every slow hour eats a little more profit." He checks the timer again, not out of doubt, but habit, the kind of habit you form when delay itself becomes a cost center. By midnight, the fryers hiss softer, but the numbers keep running. The oil darkens, the lights buzz, and the math refuses to rest. Somewhere between the border and the counter, a potato lost its innocence. And what used to be the cheapest comfort on the plate now tells a truer story that even small luxuries aren't immune to distance, and nothing stays simple once the world starts charging by the minute. Water canola, rapeseed oil. What does fairness really cost a policy, a border, or the price of a bottle? Cooking oil. Something most people barely notice has become one of the clearest mirrors of a complicated trade story. In grocery aisles and restaurant kitchens, prices for canola oil have climbed about 12% since midsummer. Not because of bad weather or crop failure or sudden demand. The plants grew just fine. What changed was the paperwork that follows every drop once it leaves Canadian soil. To begin, Canada crushes and refines most of North America's canola. Fields stretch from Alberta through Saskatchewan, producing a pale yellow seed pressed into oil that flows south in steel tanks for bottling, frying, and salad dressings. It's a routine so old that no one questions it until a tariff turns routine into risk. Meanwhile, Washington's new trade measures were meant to restore balance between agricultural partners. Officials argued that Canada's domestic energy and farm programs gave its exporters an edge. Ottawa disagreed, calling the move a political gesture wrapped in fairness language. Neither side used the word retaliation, yet everyone knew what it was. Both governments promised protection for local producers, but few explained what that means for consumers who share the same brands, restaurants, and supply trucks. By extension, once tariffs entered the system, the delays followed. Oil shipments that once cleared in hours began to linger at crossings. Trucks were rerouted to longer, less direct paths. Customs checks multiplied, insurance rates rose, and each of those steps added invisible weight to something that used to glide through quietly. When you pick up a bottle of canola oil today, you're holding not just the harvest, but the cost of time itself. As costs stack, both governments tried to soften the impact. Canada offered transport rebates for processors. The US gave small bottlers temporary import credits. The programs helped around the edges, but didn't shorten the waiting lines. Some producers call it a bandage on a slow leak. Others say it's proof that politics moves faster than trucks. Restaurants have already adjusted. Short-order cooks measure pours more carefully. Chain kitchens reduce fry cycles to stretch oil longer between changes. At-home bottles are a few ounces smaller, though the labels still look the same. For most shoppers, the story ends there, a quiet price bump and a smaller bottle. But the real change sits in the distance between two neighbors who once shared the same harvest without question. In plain terms, what's happening with oil is not just about food. It's about how trust and trade are built, strained, and rebuilt again. Dr. Elena Walsh, an agricultural economist, explained it this way. Tariffs sound strong in speeches, but they behave like slow leaks. Every day they stay in place, a little efficiency seeps out of the system. You don't see it right away, you feel it months later in the price of lunch. The oil still gleams clear in the bottle, but clarity in trade is harder to find. Two countries standing side by side now cook from the same recipe with separate ledgers. And somewhere between fairness and pride, a quiet cost keeps simmering, one no kitchen can fully hide. 5 oats. Steam curls from the bowl, the real heat started miles away. Across the country, breakfast feels a little thinner. The boxes haven't changed much. Still the same smiling oats, still the same slogans about heart health. Yet the pour looks smaller, and the price a touch higher. Since spring oat cereals and bagged oats have risen by high single digits, a quiet increase that finds you before you ever hear the word tariff. First off, most of the oats that fill American bowls don't come from American fields. They come from the wide plains of Canada, grown in the cooler belt that oats prefer. For decades, that cross-border rhythm ran like clockwork. Trains loaded in Manitoba or Saskatchewan and rolled south to mills in the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Illinois. The U.S. handled much of the packaging and branding. Canada supplied the grain. It was a relationship so smooth that hardly anyone remembered it existed. Looking upstream, that rhythm has begun to stutter. New trade measures now require additional documentation on each rail shipment, even when the companies are the same on both sides. A train that once cleared customs in a day can now take 2. Crews idle while inspectors work through backlogs. Grain sits longer in storage. Rail yards collect fees that, like interest, grow quietly over time. Every pause adds cost, not dramatic, but cumulative. Afterward, the effects filter through the system. Mills have schedules as precise as clocks. Flakers and dryers are timed to the minute. One late delivery forces rescheduling overtime, and sometimes the expensive decision to import partial loads by truck. Trucking grains is like shipping air cheap per ton by rail, ruinous by road, yet more mills have begun to do it just to stay on shelf. That cost ends up in every bag and box. As a consequence, the closer a product gets to being ready to eat, the harder it is to keep cheap. Raw oats still move freely, but flavored mixes, instant packets, and granolas now pay duties as processed food. The math is simple. The more value added before it crosses the border, the more the border charges for the privilege. And that small tariff repeats across every container, invoice, and pallet, a penny here, a cent there, until the consumer ends up paying breakfast's hidden toll. Mills have adapted as best they can. Some now blend corn, rice, or barley into formulas once made entirely of oats. Others retool lines for smaller runs and shorter packaging cycles. Private labels shrink boxes or switch suppliers altogether. Each change keeps shelves from going bare but chips away at consistency. The flavor stays familiar, though the journey behind it grows less certain. A mill manager in Minnesota explained it quietly. "We can keep the line running, but every hour of delay becomes a penny you meet at breakfast." His words carry no blame, only fatigue. Oats were never meant to be political. They were meant to be steady. Ultimately, the spoon still moves in circles. The price moves quietly underneath. What was once the calmest part of the morning now hides the story of trains, tariffs, and timing, proof that even something as ordinary as breakfast can feel the weight of distance. 6 maple syrup? "I've been buying the same syrup since my kids were little," an older customer said softly, holding a glass bottle up to the light. "It still looks the same. Just feels a little farther away." The Sunday pour still looks golden, but sweetness doesn't flow as easily anymore. For generations, maple syrup has been one of those rare things that felt immune to politics, a slow, natural product bottled straight from trees and trust. But this fall, the numbers told a quieter story. Prices at major grocery chains have climbed nearly 10% since early autumn. Canada, which supplies about 3/4 of the world's maple syrup, now faces heavier paperwork and new U.S. duties on value-added sweeteners, a category broad enough to catch even the purest syrup in its net. At first, that might sound like a technical detail, but in practice it reshapes an entire ecosystem that once moved like sap in spring, steady, seasonal, predictable. Most of Canada's syrup flows through a single provincial cooperative that manages quota storage and pricing for hundreds of small producers. It's a safeguard meant to keep farmers stable through short seasons and long winters. But when tariffs and new labeling rules appeared, that stability cracked. Beneath that, warehouses in Quebec that once sent bulk barrels south began to hold shipments waiting for clarity on new customs categories. Each delay carried storage costs, and each new form added labor to an already narrow-margin business. For bottlers in Vermont and Maine, who rely on Canadian syrup for consistency and volume, those pauses meant fewer shipments and thinner inventories. It's a strange irony. American breakfast tables depend on the very syrup that American policy now taxes. Over time, the story thickens like the syrup itself. Because maple isn't just another ingredient, it's a cultural shorthand for purity, place, and pride. The cooperative's marketing used to promise one truth, 100% pure, 100% Canadian. Now that label competes with new blends and alternate claims, product of North America, Canadian and US-sourced local bottling. The differences are subtle, but for loyal consumers, they feel like a loss. When identity travels across a tariff line, clarity turns cloudy. And it's not just national emotion. Tariffs change business math. Exporters in Canada lose efficiency. American distributors face higher input costs, And even local producers in Vermont struggle to compete with syrup that's been taxed, relabeled, and repriced. Every side pays for protection that protects no one completely. Trade analyst Mark Delaney put it this way: tariffs on cultural goods cut deeper than tariffs on commodities. They don't just shift price, they shift perception. Once consumers start asking where something really comes from, you've already lost part of the story. His words linger longer than any headline, because syrup has always been about trust, a product defined by transparency, now clouded by paperwork. In the end, the bottles still gleam amber in store windows, the pancakes still soak it up, but something intangible has changed. Sweetness is now measured not only in flavor, but in effort, in the distance it travels, the forms it fills, the small costs that add up before breakfast even begins. And just as syrup feels the weight of policy, another kitchen staple is already caught in the same tide, one that begins not in the forest, but in the fields. Wheat, pasta, and bread. The daily grains of life are about to face their own reckoning when tariffs meet the dinner table. 7 durum wheat pasta. The dough turns smooth under your palm, the price no longer does. From the grocery aisle to the restaurant kitchen, pasta, once the most predictable item on any shelf, has begun to edge upward. A box that cost $2 last summer now nudges closer to $2.50. Family-sized packs shrink, portions tighten, and what used to be an afterthought at checkout now joins the long list of foods quietly repriced by distance. From there, the story starts in the field. Durum wheat, the dense golden grain used for pasta, is not grown everywhere. It needs a particular mix of dry air and cool nights found mostly across the prairies of Canada and the northern U.S. plains. For decades, mills and pasta makers treated that region like one shared garden: Canadian grain, American mills, Italian techniques. The flow was simple. Canada sent the grain, the U.S. milled it into semolina, and the world twirled the results on its forks. Consequently, when tariffs arrived this year, they landed on more than flour. Raw durum still crossed freely, but milled semolina and finished pasta fell into the processed goods category, meaning extra duties, new forms, and longer routes through customs. The closer the product got to ready to eat, the more expensive it became to move. Tariffs, as one importer put it, don't hit the field, they hit the fork. Mills began to adjust. Some blended in softer wheats to stretch limited semolina. Others accepted slightly lower yields from each batch just to keep machines running. Pasta makers in the Midwest shortened production runs, recalibrated recipes, and swallowed higher energy and transport costs. None of it showed up on labels, but every box carried a little more math than it used to. Elsewhere, importers hedged their bets. They booked extra storage months ahead, rerouted containers through smaller ports, and paid higher insurance for the uncertainty of timing. A few tried to absorb the difference. Most couldn't. Wholesalers quietly nudged their prices. Distributors cut back promotions. Supermarkets adjusted value boxes by ounces rather than dollars, a slower way to say the same thing. Even if the pasta itself remains simple, the story behind it is anything but. Policy that was meant to defend domestic grain now makes both sides of the border less efficient. Canadian exporters lose margin on processed flour. American bottlers pay more for packaging and freight. In a market so intertwined, protectionism feels less like a wall and more like a tangle. Brand loyalty helps, but not indefinitely. Shoppers still reach for the same names, but notice the lighter feel in the hand. Restaurants swap imported spaghetti for regional blends. Chefs shorten menus to keep supply predictable. What was once just dinner now carries the faint taste of negotiation. A lot of the durum is still excellent, says a pasta buyer in New Jersey. Quality hasn't slipped. The friction's all in the paperwork. Every new form adds a few nickels, and every nickel finds its way to the shelf. He's not bitter, just tired, the kind of tired that comes from watching something sturdy turn fragile by inches. On reflection, the pasta still cooks to perfection, firm and golden, just as it should. Only its story has changed. Al dente stays honest. The journey got tougher. And as tariffs ripple through wheat, syrup, oil, and meat, what once connected kitchens across borders now measures how far a meal has to travel to stay the same. Eventually, the shelves may shift, the prices may rise, but the story behind them is still ours to understand. Trade, after all, is just another word for connection, and connection works best when it's seen clearly, not argued loudly. These tariffs and tensions may shape what we pay, but not what we value. Every meal, every grocery trip, every small choice becomes a quiet vote for the kind of system we want, one built on fairness that doesn't end at a border. So as you pour your coffee tomorrow or set the table tonight, remember, awareness costs nothing, but it changes everything. The world won't stop turning when prices climb, but it just might turn better if we pay attention to what turns with them. And maybe that's the start of something good, a little more patience, a little more understanding, and a better day ahead.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.